You're listening to Dave Bedford on the Liverpool Podcast. John Winston Lennon was born in Oxford Street Maternity Hospital on the 9th of October 1940 to Alf and Julia Lennon. From that point his life was never straightforward. His dad Alf was serving in the Merchant Navy and was rarely at home. Alf grew up in the Dingle and his family background was Irish Catholic. But after Alf's mother had lost a baby, she decided that she should change her religion and become Protestant. When Alf's father died, Polly Lennon couldn't afford to raise the 6 children, so Alf and his sister were sent to Bluecoat School in Wavertree. Alf was only 8. John's mum Julia was from a strict Methodist church background, but Julia was the rebel. She married Alf, and then she wanted a divorce, but Alf said no. Julia had an affair and gave birth to a girl in a Salvation Army nursing home in Mossley Hill. The baby was put up for adoption, which was arranged by Julia's sister, Mimi, the new matriarch in the family. Julia then set up home with her boyfriend, John Dykins, living in sin, as Mimi called it. Julia and John Dykins then had 2 daughters together. At the age of 6, Mimi was unhappy with Julia and John Dykins living in a 1-bedroom flat with young John, so she arranged for Liverpool Social Services to have John removed and for her to bring him up herself with her husband George. Mimi took John to live with her in a semi in Woolton known as Mendips. Mimi immediately enrolled John in Sunday school at St. Peter's in Woolton. That's what adults did back then, sent the kids to church. In his years at St. Peter's, John also joined the Scouts for a short time and was a member of St. Peter's Choir until he was thrown out for clowning around. Does that surprise you? He then progressed to the church youth group, who met in the church hall across the road. When John formed his skiffle group, the quarrymen were mostly filled with John's friends he'd grown up with at St. Peter's Church. They played in the hall, and this became the venue for many of the quarrymen's performances, including the first ones with Paul McCartney in the group, having met on the 6th of July 1957 at the St. Peter's Church fete. As a Beatle, John drifted away from his religion until the much publicised time when the Beatles experienced transcendental meditation with the Maharishi. However, John quickly turned his back on the Maharishi, seeing him as a phony. When John and Yoko became a couple, Yoko got John interested in the occult, though by this stage John was searching for inspiration from wherever he could. That included drink and drugs. But then, 1966, John hit the headlines when his interview with Maureen Cleave was hyped across the Atlantic in America. "We are more popular than Jesus," proclaimed John. And suddenly there were record burnings, death threats, all ahead of their US tour. John tried apologising, but he never was completely convincing. The article went on to say that Christianity will go, "I'm sure of that." Well, that's what John thought. Well, he and the Beatles survived the tour, though they didn't enjoy it, being on edge wherever they went. The Beatles were slammed in some cities, especially in the Bible Belt, where fans were encouraged to burn all their records very publicly. John became inspired by many figures during his life, including Gandhi, and this was reflected when John and Yoko staged their bed-ins for peace. Perhaps John's most famous solo song, Imagine, has caused controversy over the years. It has been called the anthem of atheism, but is there more to the Imagine song than just no religion? Was he saying no God? Or was he seeing the damage that man was doing in the name of religion, whether it be Jews, Christians, Muslims, all different religions fighting each other and claiming the moral high ground? He was saying there's nothing to kill or die for. He says imagine no heaven, no hell, no countries, no religion, no possessions, no greed or hunger. John was searching for his utopia, and in the 1970s, according to Steve Turner's Gospel According to the Beatles, John became a Christian for a short time and was turning his life around, though, by the same account, Yoko's influence turned John's head back towards reliance on the occult, numerology and astrology. Not long after, John's life was to be ended by an assassin's bullet at the age of only 40. Where John's spiritual life was, we shall never know. Imagine that.